The hologram of the execution played on an endless loop, burning itself into the memory of every human who watched. High Imperator Valzik Rand's blade had fallen with cruel precision, silencing humanity's diplomat, and with it, the fragile hope of peace. Across Earth and the colonies, the broadcast ignited an inferno of rage and despair. Commander Elise Kale stood in the command center of the United Terran Alliance headquarters. The room buzzed with frantic energy, filled with analysts dissecting the broadcast and military strategists whispering in clusters. Elise's fingers dug into the edge of the steel console, her jaw set as she rewatched the final moments. "Play it again," she ordered, her voice cold and steady. An aide hesitated. "Commander, we've..." "Again," Elise snapped. The screen blinked back to life, displaying the diplomat's final moments. The hollow clang of the severed head hitting the metallic floor echoed like a gunshot. Elise forced herself to watch, imprinting the scene in her mind. She needed to feel this fury, to remember what the stakes were. Her second-in-command, Marcus Rowe, stepped beside her. "This is deliberate," he said grimly. "Valzik wants us enraged. He's baiting us. And he'll get more than he bargained for," Elise replied. Her voice carried a quiet, deadly determination. The door hissed open, and an aide called for the council to assemble. Elise straightened, her military coat immaculate as she marched to the grand chamber where Earth's leadership gathered. The council room was a stark contrast to the chaos outside. It was pristine, almost detached, as though insulated from the gravity of the moment. Seated around a circular table were the most powerful figures in the UTA, politicians, military leaders, and scientists. Holographic displays projected graphs and strategic reports, but all eyes turned to Elise as she entered. Chancellor Dmitry Yaroslav, an older man with a face weathered by years of compromise, addressed the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, we stand at a crossroads. The execution of our diplomat is a declaration of war. But war with the Zarathian Dominion would be catastrophic. Catastrophic for them," Elise interjected, her voice cutting through the heavy silence. She stepped into the center of the room. "They want us to cower. They think we'll hesitate. If we do, we're finished." Yaroslav sighed. "Commander Kale, our fleets are outnumbered 5-1. The Dominion's technology outpaces ours in every metric. This isn't bravery, it's suicide." Elise met his gaze, unflinching. "With respect, Chancellor, they think our ingenuity is a weakness. They underestimate our adaptability, our determination. That's their mistake." A murmur spread through the council. Some nodded, others frowned, but Elise pressed on. "The Dominion doesn't want peace. They executed our diplomat to send a message, but they made one critical error: they didn't account for how we'd respond." "And how do you propose we respond?" Senator Lydia Voss asked, her tone sharp but curious. "Swiftly and decisively," Elise replied. "We hit their supply lines, weaken their outer defenses, and make them regret ever crossing us." The room erupted into debate. Elise let them argue, her arms crossed as she waited for the noise to die down. Finally, Yaroslav raised a hand. "Enough," he said. He turned to Elise. "If we give you command of the fleet, can you guarantee results?" "No," Elise said bluntly, earning a few gasps. "But I can promise this: if we don't act now, the next time we meet, it won't be to debate strategy. It'll be to negotiate our surrender." Her words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Later that evening, Elise stood on the observation deck of UTA headquarters, overlooking the sprawling cityscape of New Geneva. Lights from skyscrapers twinkled like stars, a stark reminder of what she was fighting to protect. Marcus joined her, leaning on the railing. "You really know how to light a fire under them," he said with a faint smirk. "It's not a fire," Elise replied. "It's survival. If we wait, we'll lose everything." Marcus nodded, his expression serious. "You're taking on a hell of a responsibility. The entire fleet, the lives of millions, the hopes of billions. That's a lot to carry." "I've carried worse," she said softly, her mind drifting to memories she rarely revisited. The screams of her family during the Zarathian raid on Earth echoed in her thoughts. She shoved them aside. I won't let them do to us what they did to him. Marcus didn't press further. Instead, he handed her a data pad. Your first orders as fleet commander. You'll need to approve these personnel transfers. She glanced at the list, her lips twitching into a faint smile. You're coming with me? Someone has to make sure you don't get yourself killed, Marcus replied. Besides, someone needs to keep the crew sane. Elise gave a small nod. Good. I'll need you out there. The next morning, Elise addressed the fleet in a broadcast that would echo across human space. Standing tall in her uniform, her voice carried the weight of her responsibility and the fire of her resolve. Men and women of the United Terran Alliance, she began, her image transmitted to ships and outposts alike. The Zarathian Dominion thinks they can break us. They think humanity will kneel before their cruelty. But they are wrong. Her gaze burned into the camera, as though she could see every soldier watching. They've underestimated us before, and they'll pay for that mistake. We are not weak. We are not helpless. We are human, and we will rise. The roar of applause from the command center was deafening. Elise didn't bask in it. Her mind was already on the battles ahead. The flames of betrayal had been kindled, and she would forge them into a weapon. As she turned away from the camera, Marcus approached. You've got the fleet's loyalty, he said. Now we just need a plan. We already have one, Elise said, a dangerous glint in her eye. We hit them where it hurts. No hesitation. No mercy. That night, as stars filled the sky above New Geneva, Elise stood on the deck of her flagship, the Indomitable. The execution replayed in her mind one final time, not as a source of anger but as fuel for the fire that would propel her forward. The Dominion had chosen war, and Elise Kale would ensure they lived, or died, to regret it. The hangar of the UTA flagship Indomitable was alive with energy, a symphony of preparation and purpose. Engineers swarmed like ants over the fleet's fighters, their tools sparking as they worked to ready the ships for the coming war. The air smelled of oil and ozone, a sharp reminder of the cold efficiency needed to face the task ahead. Commander Elise Kale walked the length of the hangar, her gaze sharp and calculating, as if she could will every bolt and wire into place with her sheer determination. Lieutenant Marcus Rowe fell into step beside her. Fleet's at 70% readiness, he reported. Weapon systems are being calibrated, but we're short on torpedoes. Supply runs from the outer colonies are delayed. Typical bureaucracy, Elise muttered, her voice low but firm. We don't have time to wait. Prioritize what we have and redistribute resources from non-critical ships. Already done, Marcus replied, a hint of a smirk tugging at his lips. You've trained me well. Elise didn't respond, her focus already on the next challenge. She stopped near a cluster of pilots, their chatter falling silent as her presence registered. Ladies and gentlemen, she addressed them, her tone commanding but not harsh. In a few days, we'll be launching our first strike against the Zarathian Dominion. It won't be easy. They outnumber us, and they have technology we can't match. But what they don't have, she paused, her eyes scanning the group, is what makes us human. Our adaptability, our determination. Use it. Fight smart. Fight hard. The pilots straightened, nodding in unison. As Elise turned to leave, one of them stepped forward, a young woman with a fierce gleam in her eye. Commander, permission to speak? Granted, Elise said, stopping to face her. The pilot hesitated, then spoke with a voice full of conviction. We won't let you down. Elise held her gaze for a moment, a faint smile breaking through her usual stern demeanor. I know. In the war room aboard the Indomitable, holographic maps and tactical schematics flickered in the dim light. Elise stood at the center, surrounded by her senior officers. Marcus leaned against the console, arms crossed, while Lieutenant Kiran, the fleet's chief strategist, pointed to a glowing section of the map. The Zarathian supply lines run through this sector, Aya explained. It's heavily guarded, but if we can disrupt their logistics, will cripple their ability to sustain an offensive. Marcus frowned. Heavily guarded is putting it lightly. We'll be walking into a meat grinder. Elise studied the map, her mind racing through possibilities. What's their weak point? Aya tapped a smaller node on the hologram. This outpost. It's a key refueling station. If we take it out, it'll create a ripple effect through their supply chain. Elise nodded. We'll hit it, but not head on. We'll use guerrilla tactics. Strike fast, hit hard, and retreat before they can react. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You're betting a lot on speed and precision. It's not a bet, Elise replied sharply. It's the only way we win. Aya interjected. I can have a detailed plan ready within 6 hours. Make it 3, Elise said. We move at dawn. Hours later, in the quiet before the storm, Elise walked the corridors of the ship. She stopped outside the observation deck, the faint hum of the ship's engines a steady backdrop to her thoughts. The stars stretched endlessly before her, a reminder of the vastness of the universe, and the weight of what she had taken on. Couldn't sleep? Marcus's voice broke the silence. He stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets. Elise shook her head. Too much to think about. He joined her, leaning on the railing. You know, you don't have to carry all of this alone. I'm the commander, she said simply. It's my job. Sure, Marcus said, his tone light but his eyes serious. But you're human too. Last I checked, that's what we're fighting for. Elise let out a breath, the faintest hint of a laugh escaping her. You always know how to make things complicated. It's a gift, Marcus replied with a grin. But seriously, Elise. You've got a team. Use us. She didn't respond, but the tension in her shoulders eased slightly. Marcus took that as a victory. The assault began under the cover of darkness, their fleet slipping into Zerathian territory undetected. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Elise stood at the helm, her expression calm but her body taut with focus. All squadrons report, she ordered. Squadron 1 ready? Squadron 2 standing by. Squadron 3 in position. Execute, Elise commanded. The first wave of fighters launched, their engines flaring to life as they streaked toward the Zerathian outpost. The attack was precise, the fighters targeting key defenses with surgical strikes. Explosions lit up the void, the outpost's shields straining under the assault. On the bridge, Marcus monitored the situation. They're scrambling reinforcements. Expected, Elise said. Pull back the first wave and send in the second. Keep them guessing. The second wave moved in, delivering a fresh barrage of firepower. The outpost's defenses faltered, and Elise saw her opening. Launch the main offensive. Take it down. The fleet surged forward, unleashing a torrent of firepower. The outpost's shields collapsed, and within minutes, the structure was a burning wreck. Cheers erupted on the bridge, but Elise remained focused. Status report, she said. Aya's voice came through the calm. Minimal casualties. The outpost is destroyed. Supply lines are disrupted. Good, Elise said. Now get us out of here before their reinforcements arrive. As the fleet retreated, Elise allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. It wasn't a victory in the traditional sense, but it was a step forward, a spark of resistance against a seemingly unstoppable enemy. Back on the Indomitable, the crew celebrated quietly, their spirits lifted by the success of the mission. Elise joined them briefly, offering a few words of encouragement before retreating to her quarters. She sat at her desk, staring at the datapad in front of her. Reports, casualty lists, and intelligence summaries filled the screen, but her mind was elsewhere. The memory of the enslaved humans they had found during the mission lingered. They had freed them, but the sight of their hollow eyes and scarred bodies was a stark reminder of the stakes. This wasn't just a war for survival, it was a war for humanity's very soul. Elise clenched her fists. She couldn't afford to falter. The Dominion had shown no mercy, and neither would she. They had lit the spark of resistance, and she would fan it into a flame that would consume their oppressors. The glow of the Zarathian outpost's ruins lingered on the holographic display in the Indomitable S war room. Commander Elise Kale stood at the center, surrounded by her officers, their faces drawn with exhaustion and resolve. The raid had been a success, but the cost was beginning to show. "We disrupted their supply lines," Lieutenant Aya Kiran reported, her voice steady but tinged with caution. "But it's only a temporary victory. Intelligence suggests reinforcements are already being mobilized to secure their logistics. They won't let us pull that off again so easily." Elise nodded, her sharp gaze fixed on the tactical map. "They're bleeding, but not enough. We need something bigger, something that shifts the balance permanently." Marcus Rowe, her second in command, leaned forward with a frown. "And what exactly does something bigger look like? We can't just keep poking the bear without a long-term plan." Aya interjected, her fingers dancing across the console as she pulled up new data. "During the raid, we intercepted encrypted communications. Our tech teams managed to crack part of the code. There's mention of a prototype cloaking system, experimental, but if we could get our hands on it." Elise's eyes narrowed. "Where?" Aya hesitated before highlighting a section of the map. "Zarathia Prime. Their most heavily fortified planet." The room fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. Marcus broke the tension with a low whistle. "You're suggesting we infiltrate the heart of their empire? That's madness." "It's bold," Elise corrected, her tone cutting through the room like steel. "If we can neutralize their cloaking advantage, we level the playing field. Right now, their fleet's ability to disappear is what keeps them ahead of us." Aya added, "We've also identified a possible vulnerability. Their cloaking systems rely on a central hub for calibration. If we disable it, we could render their technology useless galaxy-wide." Marcus shook his head. "Even with that intel, how do we get in and out alive? This isn't just risky, it's suicide." Elise met his gaze, her voice low but firm. "If we don't take risks, we've already lost. The Dominion won't stop until they crush us. We have to strike where it hurts." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. Finally, Marcus sighed and leaned back. "Well, Commander, if you're going to drag us into hell, I guess I'll make sure we don't burn alone." Elise allowed herself the faintest hint of a smile. "Good. We'll need everyone at their best. Aya, finalize the infiltration plan. Marcus, ensure our strike team is ready. We leave in 48 hours. The preparation for the mission was intense. The crew worked tirelessly, their focus unbroken despite the weight of the task ahead. In the armory, soldiers checked their weapons, their faces set with grim determination. Mechanics fine-tuned the strike ships, their hands moving with practiced precision. In the briefing room, Elise addressed the infiltration team. A mix of elite soldiers, engineers, and pilots stood before her, their expressions a blend of nerves and resolve. "You've all been chosen for this mission because you're the best at what you do," she began, her voice steady and clear. "Our objective is simple: infiltrate Zarathia Prime, disable the cloaking hub, and get out. But make no mistake, this will be the most dangerous mission of your careers. Some of us won't make it back." She let the words hang for a moment, the gravity of the mission sinking in. Then she continued, "But every second we buy, every weakness we exploit, brings us closer to victory. You are not just soldiers. You're the spark that will light the fire of our survival." As she finished, the room erupted in a chorus of affirmations. The team dispersed, each member laser-focused on their preparations. Elise lingered for a moment, her gaze drifting to the stars visible through the viewport. She knew the odds, but she also knew there was no turning back. The Indomitable approached Zarathia Prime under the cover of darkness, its stealth systems pushed to their limits. The planet loomed ahead, a harsh world of towering spires and glowing energy grids. Its defenses were formidable, with patrol ships and sensor arrays scanning for any sign of intrusion. In the cockpit of the strike shuttle, Marcus glanced at Elise, his hands steady on the controls. "This is the part where I remind you how insane this is." "I'll take that as a compliment," Elise replied, her focus unwavering. She turned to the team seated behind them. "Remember, Precision is key. Stick to the plan, and we'll make it out alive. The shuttle descended into the planet's atmosphere, weaving through narrow gaps in the patrol patterns. Aya's voice crackled over the comm. You're clear to proceed. Sensors are blind for the next 6 minutes. Copy that, Elise responded. Let's move. The shuttle landed in a remote canyon, its sleek design blending seamlessly with the rocky terrain. The team disembarked quickly, moving with practiced efficiency. Clad in specialized suits that masked their heat signatures, they advanced toward the cloaking hub. The structure was a towering monolith of black metal, pulsing with an eerie blue light. Elise signaled for the team to halt as they reached the perimeter. Aya, status on the security grid? Aya's voice came through, calm and focused. I've disabled the outer sensors, but you've got a patrol heading your way. ETA 3 minutes. Elise turned to Marcus. Set the charges on the south side. We'll draw them away. He nodded, leading a small group toward the target. Elise and the remaining team moved to intercept the patrol, taking up positions in the shadows. As the Zarathian soldiers approached, their elongated forms and glowing eyes scanning the area, Elise raised her weapon, her finger steady on the trigger. The ambush was swift and silent. The team neutralized the patrol with precision, leaving no time for alarms to be raised. Marcus's voice crackled over the comm. Charges set. We're ready to blow this thing sky high. Elise nodded. Do it. The ground shook as the charges detonated, the explosion sending a shockwave through the structure. Sparks flew, and the hub's energy pulsed erratically before dimming. Alarms blared across the facility, but Elise and her team were already moving, retreating toward the shuttle. As the team raced back, Zarathian reinforcements descended from above, their ships firing relentlessly. The shuttle's engines roared to life as Marcus shouted, Hold on tight! Elise fired from the open hatch, covering their escape as the shuttle lifted off. Explosions erupted around them, the sky a chaotic blur of fire and metal. Aya's voice came through the comm. You've got a cruiser inbound. 30 seconds to intercept. Noted, Marcus replied, pushing the shuttle to its limits. Elise, I hope you've got a miracle up your sleeve. Elise smirked, her adrenaline surging. Just keep flying. As the cruiser loomed closer, the Indomitable emerged from hyperspace, its weapons blazing. The cruiser's shields faltered under the assault, allowing the shuttle to slip through. Cheers erupted in the cockpit as they docked safely aboard the flagship. Later, in the debriefing room, Elise stood before her team. They were battered and bruised, but alive and victorious. You did good, she said simply. The cloaking hub is down. The Dominion just lost one of their greatest advantages. Marcus leaned against the wall, his trademark grin back in place. So, what's next? Elise's gaze hardened. We take the fight to them. This was just the beginning. The team nodded, their resolve unshaken. The edge of desperation had given way to a glimmer of hope, and Elise Kale was determined to see it through to the end. The silence of the war room was heavy, broken only by the soft hum of holographic displays and the occasional click of boots against metal. Commander Elise Kale stood at the center, the weight of the mission pressing on her like a storm cloud. Before her, a massive projection of Zarathia Prime and its orbital defenses shimmered in the dim light. This is it, Elise began, her voice steady and resolute. The Dominion has no cloaking advantage. We've forced them into open combat, and they won't be holding back. Neither will we. Her officers surrounded her, their faces a mix of determination and exhaustion. Lieutenant Aya Kiran, her sharp eyes scanning tactical readouts, leaned forward. The updated schematics show reinforced shields across their capital fleet. It's going to take every ounce of firepower to punch through. Marcus Rowe crossed his arms, his usual light-hearted demeanor replaced by grim focus. We don't just need firepower. We need precision. If we waste shots, they'll turn us into debris before we even scratch them. Elise nodded, her gaze unwavering. We won't waste anything. This fleet represents everything humanity has left to give. Every pilot, every engineer, every ship, they know what's at stake. We'll take the fight to Valzik Ran himself, and we'll show the Dominion exactly what happens when they underestimate us. A ripple of agreement passed through the room. Elise turned to Aya. Coordinate the assault. Marcus, oversee the strike teams. We launch in 2 hours. The fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, a shimmering wall of Terran warships arrayed against the vast, angular vessels of the Zarathian Dominion. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Elise stood tall, her expression carved from stone. The stars around them were a canvas of motion as ships maneuvered into position. Enemy fleet detected, Aya reported. They're mobilizing to intercept. Marcus's voice cut through the tension. They've got the numbers, Commander. But we've got the fire. Elise smirked faintly. Let's make it count. The first salvos of the battle lit up the void, torrents of energy and missile fire crossing the gulf between the fleets. The Indomitable shook violently as enemy fire grazed its shields, the bridge crew working tirelessly to stabilize the ship. Redirect power to the forward arrays, Elise commanded. We're punching through their center line. Aya's hands moved quickly over her console. Target locked. Weapons ready. Fire, Elise ordered. The Indomitable's cannons unleashed a devastating barrage, tearing through a Zarathian frigate in a blaze of fire and twisted metal. Cheers erupted on the bridge, but Elise raised a hand, silencing them. Stay focused. This isn't over. As the battle raged, the Terran fleet employed hit-and-run tactics, exploiting the gaps in the Zarathian formation. Elise's voice echoed over the comms, her orders clear and decisive. Strike teams, engage their flagship. Draw their fire away from the main fleet. In the cockpit of a strike fighter, Marcus led the charge. His voice crackled over the comms, steady despite the chaos around him. Keep it tight, people. Hit their engines and get out clean. The strike team wove through enemy fire, their ships dancing like sparks in the wind. Explosions rocked the Zarathian flagship as their missiles found their marks, forcing the massive vessel to redirect its focus. On the Indomitable, Elise watched the battle unfold, her mind a blur of calculations and possibilities. Aya, status on their shields. Still holding, but we're seeing strain in the aft quadrant, Aya replied. A few more direct hits, and we'll have an opening. Elise nodded. Relay that to the fleet. Concentrate fire on their weak point. As the Terran fleet pressed the attack, the Indomitable closed in on the Zarathian flagship. Elise's gaze was fixed on the imposing vessel, its black hull shimmering with energy. She knew Valzik Ran was aboard, directing the Dominion forces with his usual cold precision. We need to take him out, Elise said, her voice quiet but resolute. Without him, their coordination will crumble. Marcus's voice crackled through the comms. I hope you're not suggesting what I think you are. I am, Elise replied. Prepare for boarding. The bridge fell silent. Aya turned to her, her expression a mix of concern and admiration. You're going to face him directly? Elise's eyes burned with determination. This war ends today. The boarding party launched in a hail of fire and steel, their shuttle punching through the Zarathian flagship's defenses with sheer audacity. Elise led the charge, her weapon blazing as she cut down enemy soldiers in their path. The corridors of the ship were a labyrinth of alien architecture, glowing with an eerie blue light. Keep moving, Elise ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. We're almost there. As they approached the command deck, a squad of Zarathian soldiers blocked their path. The ensuing firefight was brutal, but Elise's team fought with relentless precision. When the last enemy fell, Elise stepped over the bodies, her weapon raised. The doors to the command deck slid open, revealing Valzik Ran standing at the center, his towering form radiating authority. His crimson eyes locked onto Elise, and a cruel smile curved across his face. Commander Kale, he said, his voice a low growl. I must admit your tenacity is impressive. Elise didn't waver. Your reign ends here, Valzik. Valzik laughed, a cold, hollow sound. You think you can defeat the Dominion with brute force? Humanity is a fleeting spark in the darkness. I am the storm that will snuff it out. Elise raised her weapon, but Valzik moved with inhuman speed, closing the distance between them in an instant. The fight was a blur of motion, Elise's strikes precise but Valzik's counterattacks relentless. Sparks flew as their weapons clashed, the sounds of battle echoing through the chamber. "You fight well for a human," Valzik taunted, his movements fluid and deadly. "But you are still inferior." Elise gritted her teeth, channeling every ounce of her strength and skill. "And you talk too much." With a final, desperate maneuver, she disarmed him, her weapon trained on his chest. Valzik froze, his expression twisting into one of fury and disbelief. "It's over," Elise said, her voice cold and unwavering. "Your empire dies with you." Without hesitation, she fired. The shot pierced Valzik's chest, and he collapsed to the floor, his crimson eyes fading to black. The death of Valzik Ran rippled through the Zarathian fleet like a shockwave. Their coordination faltered, and the Terran forces seized the advantage. One by one, the Dominion ships fell, their once mighty fleet reduced to wreckage. On the bridge of the Indomitable, cheers erupted as the final Zarathian vessel was destroyed. Elise returned, her armor scorched and bloodied but her resolve unbroken. She stood before her crew, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "We've won," she said. "But this victory came at a cost. Let us honor the sacrifices made today and build a future worthy of them." The crew saluted, their faces filled with pride and determination. Elise turned to the viewport, watching the remnants of the Zarathian fleet drift into the void. The storm had passed, but she knew the fight for humanity's future was far from over.